All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for attending today's webinar on the 2024 IECC Commissioning for Existing Buildings. This webinar is recorded and the recording is posted on the Code Adoption Toolkit usually within the next week. We're also looking at switching platforms, so I'll be giving updates during these webinar series if you would like to learn more. But if there are any issues with audio, feel free to write me in the chat. My name is Erica DeLello. I'm a senior project manager for Noresco. And this series is sponsored by the Colorado Energy Office with training materials created by Noresco. Kevin and I have been working with the Colorado Energy Office for the last, I don't know how many years now. But we've been providing trainings just like this one. As you can see on my screen, this is the first webinar in our new series. And so as you can see on the screen, we've got a whole bunch of other webinars coming up at our usual Wednesday webinar timeframe at noon. But then we've also added a specific series. We're doing mini series to support the low energy and carbon code, and this series that's starting later in October will be focused on C406 and the differences between LACC versus the 2024 IECC. So if you are interested in that, you probably got an email yesterday with links, or have previous ones, or there'll be more going out. So definitely register for this new series as well. And then a couple other updates is that we are creating an on-demand platform that'll be available. Probably we're targeting before the end of the year, where you'll be able to take courses at your own pace and also be able to view existing recordings. But of course, if you're interested in a specific topic for your company or organization, feel free to reach out to me. Happy to set something up for you with one of our awesome trainers. We also offer technical assistance for code adoption. So if you're just jurisdiction looking at updating to the latest codes, reach out, we can help. We do all of these things and more. So we're here to just help you guys lessen the burden when you change to a new code. And this is in support of the entire iCode suite, not just energy code. This is a lot of words on a page, but I just wanted to kind of show all of the new resources that are available to you all. And just a couple to highlight. We've got like a suite of air sealing details, significant changes for all of these other iCodes as well, specific energy code explanations, manual J, S, and D checklists, as well as our regular checklists. So there is going to be a whole lot posted to the Code Adoption Toolkit, and then we're also looking at what we should do next. So that there will be an energy code resource survey coming out that'll be sent out through our email notifications, and I would greatly appreciate your input to where we should be creating resources, what would be the most helpful to you all. And last but not least, my favorite resource is the helpline. You can submit a question on any of the iCodes, and a subject matter expert gets back to you in a couple business days. So whether or not you're a plans examiner, checking for permit, or a homeowner that's looking at what code requirements apply to a specific project, we're here to help. Okay, so just a couple of administrative items. I've got a poll that I'm going to launch now. This just helps us kind of refine and understand how you found out about this webinar series and what your background is and all that good stuff. So if you could please take a minute to fill that out. All right, so throughout the webinar, we do want to encourage questions. So please use that Q&A function, and I'll let Kevin know at the end of the presentation. There's also that ability to raise your hand and ask the question directly to Kevin. You know, with this presentation, we're really looking at, you know, what are we missing here? What else, what other questions do you guys have as it relates to commissioning an existing building? So feel free to chime in, use the chat. and Kevin is happy to expand on those specific topics. Last but not least, there will be a survey window that pops up following the webinar. If you could please take a minute to provide that feedback, it helps us decide what trainings are next and improve on these. Okay, so with that, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen and let you take it from here, Kevin.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
I will just make sure that you can see the correct screen there.
Yep, looks good.
Okay, very good. All right, so I'll take it for here. Thank you, Erica. As Erica mentioned, there's so much to talk about with existing building commissioning. So we're trying to give you maybe a 101 type course here. And if there's something that you want us to expand upon in another presentation or training topic for existing building commissioning, let us know. We heard in the past that this is a topic that you all wanted to go over, so we are, but it wasn't very much detail given to us on what exactly in existing building commissioning you all wanted to be trained on. So we'll give you a little taste here today, and then if there's something more that you want us to go on, let us know. So as you can see on the screen, we're going to be talking about the 2024 IECC existing building commissioning on the commercial side. A little bit about me. I've been in the industry for about 15 years doing everything from commissioning to plans examiner, field inspector. I've done a bunch of trainings, over 200, probably way more than that now on that. But I also served on the 2021 IECC Energy Task Force Committee, certified energy manager, lead AP, also in the Air Barrier Association of America field as well. Some learning objectives today. We're going to review what commissioning is and why it's important. Again, this is a little bit of a refresher, if you will, on that. Some of you may be familiar with commissioning on new buildings. Some of you may not be familiar with commissioning at all. Then we're going to look at, examine the significant changes from the 2021 code to now the 2024 code, which has now been adopted, or not adopted, but presented out there. Assess the requirements. So when you need to do commissioning on existing buildings, and then what you need to do for existing building commissioning. All right, agenda. Like I said, we'll start with the overview, discuss the changes, go into chapter 5, which is the existing building section, talk about existing building commissioning, and then discussions and questions. So what is commissioning? Building commissioning is a structured quality assurance process that verifies and documents that a building systems like HVAC, electrical, plumbing, envelope, you name it, are designed, installed, tested, and operating according to the owner's project requirements, or sometimes you might hear that as an OPR, and the original design intent. Basically, it ensures that the functions of the building are functioning efficiently and effectively from the start of the turnover process. And then it identifies and resolves performance issues, hopefully before occupancy. Sometimes that's not the case, but hopefully it is. And there's long-term benefits that come with commissioning, like energy savings, improved occupant comfort, and reduced operating costs. So why do we commission? So this is to ensure all systems are installed and operating as designed, delivering the intended performance and efficiency for occupant comfort. Again, this is basically, in a nutshell, saying it's what the client paid for, ensuring what the client has paid for, which you would think is a no-brainer. However, due to the construction industry and the speed, and delays and deliveries and materials and things like that, a lot of things get overlooked, especially on large projects. So this is just another independent third party that will verify that the owner's getting what they paid for. There are several different commissioning guidelines to follow. As you can see on the screen, there's the AECC commissioning guideline, ASHRAE guideline 1, guideline 1.1, guideline 0. Like there's so many, and these aren't all of them that are listed. But the reason I'm putting this up there is it's important to know what your project is falling into, which one of these guidelines. Is it an ASHRAE guideline? Is it the IECC? Is it a LEED or a building certification guideline or reference, which would then reference, a different guideline, things like that. So it's very important to know what your project falls into from a commissioning standpoint when you're asking for commissioning or getting commissioning done, because although most of these are very similar, these different guidelines, there are some different nuances, things that one guideline say you might have to do and another guideline that says that you don't have to do it. So it'd be very important for you to know exactly which standard or guideline that your project is going after. In addition to the guidelines, there are several different types of commissioning as well. So there's new construction commissioning, retro commissioning, recommissioning, continuous commissioning, monitoring-based commissioning, building enclosure commissioning, you name it. There's so many more. You can see kind of the acronyms on the screen there. Retro is, you might be asking what retro commissioning is or recommissioning. So retro commissioning is if you have an existing building that has not previously been commissioned before. That's retro commissioning. Recommissioning is for a building that's previously been commissioned. They both share the same acronym, RCX. So you might hear that in the industry a little bit, that term there, but it's one and the same. There's also code compliant commissioning, which is what we're going to be talking about here, which usually follows IECC or ASHRAE 90.1. So just remember that if you're following IECC for your code or ASHRAE 90.1 for commissioning, each AHJ, authority having jurisdiction, has the opportunity to amend their own commissioning requirements or amend their code. So even though you might be following IECC 2024, which is what we're talking about today, the AHJ you're working in might have amended that section of the code to add, subtract, modify any of those requirements in there, which I know doesn't help with how many different commissioning items there could be, but as long as you know what commissioning standard or code you're following, your commissioning agent should be able to point you in the right direction. All right, so just like the last two slides, there are tons of systems to commission. The list goes on and on. There's some on the screen that you can see. I won't read through all of them. But the IECC 2024, as it's written, not amended, as it's written, only asks for mechanical, electrical, and plumbing. So even though that some of these are gaining more and more popularity, like the enclosure commissioning or fire life safety, renewable energy, those aren't required by base code. So just know that. Also, one thing I like to point out in this slide is that electrical commissioning sometimes is called or referred to as power and lighting commissioning. So if you're following a certain building certification that you're going after, they might call electrical commissioning power and lighting. The other thing is enclosure commissioning, can also be called envelope commissioning. It's one and the same. Envelope commissioning includes everything from walls, framing, sealants, insulation, roofing, windows, doors, air barriers. That we're seeing a lot more projects go after that one. As in new construction, that is a system that is required, but in the existing building commissioning side, that one is not required yet. All right, so that's the overview of what commissioning is. If you weren't familiar with that, hopefully I didn't bore you too much on that part, but let's jump into chapter 5. Chapter 5 is the existing building chapter of IECC. Within chapter 5, there are really 4 sections. I have 3 listed here, but the 4th one doesn't really apply, and we'll get into that a little bit more. But the 4 sections are additions, alterations, change of use or occupancy, and repairs. So in an existing building, one of your building project should fall into one of those 4 categories. And based on which category, addition, alteration, change of use or occupancy, you fall in, will depend on what type of commissioning or what all needs to be commissioned in your existing building project. So just to recap, renovated or altered buildings could affect the energy use of a building. That's why we do existing building commissioning. So chapter 5 requires that application of certain parts of chapter 4, which is your new construction part, is in place in order to maintain, if not improve, the conservation of energy by the renovated or altered part of the building. So changes from 2021 to 2024 on IECC existing building work, it basically raises the envelope. It raises the mechanical and lighting efficiency requirements. It clarifies and expanding when energy upgrades are triggered during the repairs and alterations. That's what we're going to talk about. And really from 2021 to 2024, it aligns a lot of the ASHRAE standards from 90.1 between IECC and the rest of the standards. So really what we're seeing is the 2024 IECC is starting to come in line with ASHRAE 90.1. Some studies say about 10% energy difference between 2021 and 2024, energy savings on that when you're following the code. All right, let's jump into the chapter 5 additions. So before we get into what all is needed to talk about in the different sections of this chapter 5, the 4 categories we mentioned is additions, alterations, change of use, or occupancy and repairs. So if an unconditioned space is changed to a conditioned space, then it falls into this addition section. So I'll say that one more time. An unconditioned space that's changed into a conditioned space falls into an addition in the purpose of the code. So one other thing on the addition sections, which I want to point out, is that section C405, which is your additional energy efficiency requirements section, you have to have so many credits for that section. If you're doing an addition on an existing building, you don't have to get all the additional energy efficiency credits. You only have to get 50% of the credits required based on the occupancy and climate zone. Also, you must comply with the renewable energy systems, but only for that addition part. So moving through the addition section, there are these are the 5 most common addition sections that we see on there. Fenestrations, really, like, we see some of those, but those aren't as common on, oh, I'm sorry, for additions, they are, not for alterations, sorry. But there's 3 scenarios for fenestrations. New windows, additions that have more window area than allowed, or where the addition puts the entire building over the allowable window area. If any one of those 3 scenarios happen, don't worry, commissioning is not required on the windows. For mechanical systems on an addition, any new mechanical systems and equipment that are part of the addition do need to be commissioned. So it makes sense. It's brand new piece of equipment, right? It's going in, it needs to be commissioned. Water heater. New systems that are part of the addition. So again, it's a brand new system going in there. You're not tapping into a system that's already there. Does not need to be commissioned. And this is for additions. Lighting. New lighting systems that are part of the addition, they do need to be commissioned. And then finally on the screen, renewable energy. Any new renewable energy added to the addition, due to the building as an addition, does not need to be commissioned. So that, in short, are your addition section for existing building commissioning. So I'll recap real quick. The 2 things that need to be commissioned on an addition would be your mechanical system and your lighting system. All right, let's jump to alterations. So alterations, I'm just gonna go straight into mechanical systems here. Well, before I go into that, let me talk about what an alteration is, because this one is probably the most common one we see in chapter 5. So the definition of alteration is an alteration, alterations that are substantial improvements must meet this section to earn the credits in this. So substantial improvement, let me give you that definition. It's cost 50% more or more of the market value of just the structure before the improvement. So that is a substantial improvement. So that essentially those 2 things put you into the alteration category. So this is typically what we see is like tenant improvements, TI type projects fall into the alteration category here. Just like the additions, section C406, a little background here, that one where you have to do additional energy efficiency credits, where in the addition, you only had to do 50% of the credit. This you have to get all the credits for your additional energy efficiency selections there. And the reason I'm telling you this additional energy efficiency section, C406, is that depending on what credits you pick, those credits might affect your commissioning requirements. So that is why I'm bringing that up. I know it might seem like, well, why are we talking about, additional energy efficiency credits in the existing building commissioning section? Well, that is because 2 of those credits that you could potentially pick do affect your commissioning on existing buildings. All right, so my notes disappeared. Give me 1 second. Let me see if I can find them somewhere else. Bear with me. Okay, so mechanical systems. If it's new, And then if it serves the alteration, and if it meets the square footage and BTU threshold, it needs to be commissioned. So let's just say if it's new for right now, because we haven't talked about what the square footage and BTU threshold is, then it needs to be commissioned. Also, it needs to comply with the control requirements of the code. So not only does your new mechanical system need to be commissioned, the controls, it has to have controls, and the control side has to be commissioned. One big thing that we see with these mechanical alterations on these projects is that it deals with the control side. So sometimes we have a 40-year-old building with a building control or building automation system that is dated, as the building is. But now you have this brand new shiny mechanical system and controls that go with it, and they don't play well together. And so we see this pretty often where now the customer is like stuck with, what do? We need to have controls, but controls can't tie into the old system. Now we have to we have to upgrade our control system, this and that. So the reason I'm telling you this is to catch it ahead of time, is that if your system is old and dated, make sure that your new mechanical system and its controls can integrate into that building automation system or that control system that's already in place. That's pretty important. Okay, domestic water heating. The code calls this service water heating. A lot of people are like, what's that? I call it domestic water heating. It's the same thing. If it's new, and again, meets the square footage and BTU threshold, then it needs to be commissioned. There are some exceptions. So there are some exceptions for new domestic water heating systems that serve individual dwelling units or sleeping units. There are some exceptions to those, but just know that if it's new and it meets the threshold of the square footage or BTUs, it needs to be commissioned. Let's go ahead and talk about what those thresholds are. I have it later on in the presentation, but that's twice now that I mentioned it and I haven't told you what it is. So the threshold is if you're an existing building, you have to do commissioning unless two things. Your building square footage is less than 10,000 square feet and your energy usage is less than 960,000 BTUs per hour. So I'll say that again. It has to be both to be exempt from commissioning. 10,000 square feet or less, or 960,000 BTUs per hour. Or sorry, and 960. So if your mechanical system or domestic water system is new and the building's over 10,000 square feet, then you would still need to do commissioning on those. Okay, last one in the alteration section is lighting. Lighting's broken into two sections now from 2021. Lighting is now broken into an interior section and an exterior section. In the old code, it used to be, hey, if you touch 10% of the lights, if they're replaced, then it needs to be commissioned. Okay. Well, now in the new code, that's different. In 2024, it now has 3 scenarios on what lighting is. So it needs to be commissioned if one of these 3 things are in place. If the addition or relocation of full height walls when lighting is altered if it hasn't, sorry, let me back up. If it has an addition or relocation of full height walls, when lighting is altered, or where lighting controls is altered. So if you're adding or relocating full height walls, then it needs to be commissioned, your lighting system. When lighting is altered is the second scenario. So anytime you alter lighting, it needs to be commissioned. And the third scenario is if the lighting controls is altered, it needs to be commissioned. So it's no longer, oh, we only touched 9%. We don't have to do it. Now it's, do we build walls? Do we add walls, relocate walls? Do we touch any lighting? Do we touch any lighting controls? If you did any of that, then you need to commission. This basically means that any lighting will need to be brought up to the new codes and standards and commissioned. Essentially, that's what we're getting at, right? Like all lighting is going to need to be commissioned for most of these projects. So that's for interior. They also have exterior lighting in the new code. And that has two different scenarios that require commissioning. Where the combined power of added and receptacles is more than 400 watts. And any portion of exterior lights or controls are added or altered. So if you're adding any exterior lights or altering the controls of the exterior lights, you need to commission the exterior lighting. Or if your combined power of the added lights and receptacles is more than 400 watts, and that will be exterior, then they need to be commissioned. All right, that's it for alterations. Let's now let's go to change of use or change of occupancy. All right, so in this one's a little bit goofy here in terms of what they did in my mind, but try to simplify it here. If your building falls into group F, H, S, or U occupancies, then you're not going to follow this section. You're going to follow the alterations section. If it doesn't fall into one of those group categories, then you're going to follow the change of occupancy or change of use section. All right, so let's jump into this. Mechanical. If the energy use is the same or it is now increased, the system serving that area undergoing the change needs to be commissioned. So we say again, only the area undergoing the change needs to be commissioned if your energy use has stayed the same or increased. For our domestic water heating, if your energy use is the same or increased, you are to follow the domestic water heating section, which is C404. However, C404 does not require commissioning. I think they goofed in that. I would suspect in the next code cycle that changes. But for now, and the change of use or change of occupancy, domestic water heating would not need to be commissioned. Lighting. If energy use is the same or increased, it needs to be commissioned. Pretty simple. And that's it for change of use or change of occupancy. Repairs. This one's pretty easy. Repairs are not required to do commissioning. So This includes routine maintenance and ordinary repairs uh, like swapping out a control panel or dampers or a motor, light bulbs, so filters, things like that. Basically anything that doesn't require a permit or abatement falls into the repairs category, and they would not need to be commissioned. So that's it for those sections. So now let's talk about when commissioning is triggered. All right. So when is commissioning required? So in this section here, I gave you the thresholds before, but I want to talk about what that was previously. So let me put this up on the screen. All right. It's easier to talk about when commissioning is exempt on existing buildings than it is, in my mind, on when it is required. The way I look at this is it's always required on existing buildings unless you see what's on the screen, unless the building or that area is less than 10,000 square feet and the combined capacity is less than 960,000 BTUs per hour. This is a big change in the code. This is pretty big from 2021. In 2021, it didn't have a square footage requirement. So this square footage now comes into play here on that. Or I shouldn't say not requirement, an exemption on square footage. Also in 2021, the heating, cooling, and service water heating was broken into two categories. The cooling was on its own, and that was like 480,000 BTUs. And then the heating and service water heating were another category, and that was 600,000. So if you do the math, that's like a little over a million BTUH combined. So in the new code 2024, they've combined all those together, and it's now 960,000 and triggered also by if your square footage is under that, then you don't need to do it. So big change here in the code from 2021 to 2024 on existing building commissioning. All right, so let's do an example. Let's see, we're probably okay on time here. Okay, so here's an example. Get you guys all interactive here. A high-rise downtown is doing a tenant improvement on floors 12 through 15. Each floor is approximately, well, let's just say 2,500 square feet and has the following equipment on each floor. Is commissioning required? Yes or no? And go ahead and feel free to put it in the chat. Your answer, yes or no. I'll give you not a whole lot of time here, but really want to walk you through how this is done. So we can start by your square footage. As you're going through that, I'll talk through this. Our total square footage, what do we got? Floor 12, 13, 14, 15. So that's 4 floors. 4 times 2,500 is 10,000 square feet. Okay, we know that. What's the other thing we need to do? We now need to look at our BTUH. In this particular slide, this is pretty common. We have NBH and KW. So you have to convert. We're not here to do all the math. You got to convert KW to BTUs and NBH to BTUs. Let's just give you the answer on that. 90,000 BTUs per hour. Okay, so 90,000 BTUs per hour and 10,000 square feet. Do we need a commission? Yes or no?
Looks like we got a couple yeses, and one no.
Okay.
We've got a raised hand. Patrick, I'm gonna go ahead and allow you to talk real quick. If you want to unmute yourself.
Thought I heard a little bit of something, but maybe not.
No.
Yeah, you there, Patrick?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually clicked on the wrong button there, so
Oh,
I say yes.
very good. No worries. You are correct. So commissioning is required. So you would have to remember on the last slide, you would have to hit both under 10,000 square feet and 960,000 square feet, or 960,000 BTU per hour. So for those of you who said, yes, it is required, very good. Okay, so existing building commissioning, what is required of that? Really, I try to break it down to be as simple as possible. I mean, the code has several pages on this. 4 things. That's it. Code compliant commissioning for existing buildings only require 4 things. These are the 4 things. A commissioning plan, testing, adjusting, and balancing, functional performance tests, and then a report. That's it. Pretty simple. Let's go through what each one of those things are, just so that you all are familiar of what that is. And that will be the end of the presentation. We can open it up. All right, so real quick, commissioning plan. This is what needs to be in there. General project information, what systems need to be commissioned. So again, that's going back to the beginning of the presentation when we said, we're going to follow this standard. We're going to commission these systems, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and it's going to be domestic water heating, air handling units, rooftop units, you name it. That's all that info should be in there. The functional performance tests. So how you're going to test them. So your sequences of operation, the schedule on when you're going to test. You're allowed to do deferred testing if the weather doesn't cooperate for one season or the other. And then the roles and responsibilities of the team. So item number 1, commissioning plan. That's what needs to be in it. Your commissioning authority will provide you with that. Second item, tab, testing, adjusting, and balancing. This is both for air side and water side. And it's a gray area in the code. While this is in the commissioning section, the commissioning authority does not hold that contract, nor does this work. Now, you might find some commissioning authorities that are capable of doing that work, but that is not part of their original contract, usually. So the gray area on this is, it doesn't say what the commissioning authority is supposed to do for tab. If you follow any of the guidelines that I mentioned earlier on in the presentation, there is standards and things that you're supposed to do as the commission authority for tab. And usually that requires you to take a sample of the readings that the tab contractor took yourself to compare that their equipment was calibrated correctly, their readings are correctly, they're reading correctly, and things like that. Other standards let you just review the tab report and see and comment on if the tab findings are within the standards of tab. So that's the gray area. 1, is the commissioning authority supposed to review the report only? Or 2, are they actually supposed to take a sample of the readings on that? Either way, I think will be fine and acceptable for code compliant commissioning, but just know that that is a thing one of the 4 things that the commissioning authority needs to do. All right, number 3, functional performance testing. So in this section, we talked about HVAC, domestic water heating, and controls. Later in the next couple slides, we'll talk about the lighting a little bit more in depth, or the electrical testing. If for some reason you can't test a mode of operation, say it's 90 degrees outside and you need to test heating mode, you can have seasonal testing or deferred testing. So you would come back later on and say, hey, on September the 30th, the weather is going to be cold enough for us to test heating on this particular piece of equipment. We will do testing of that sequence only then. And that's absolutely fine. All you have to do is in your report, let the AHJ know when approximately that testing is going to happen and what the weather conditions are needed for that testing to occur. So that's functional testing of your mechanical and domestic water. Then let's talk about lighting. Occupancy sensors. If you have to test, which we established pretty much every project existing building will have to test interior lighting. Occupancy sensors have to be commissioned and tested at 7 or less. All of them have to be tested. So if you only have 7 or less, then you have to test every single one. If you have more than 7, then you can use the sampling method. Sampling says by code 10% and no fewer than 1 of each combination. So you might have like a dual type occupancy sensor. You might have 10 of those and 10 of just single occupancy sensors. So then you have to do at least 1 of each. You can always test more, and I don't think any code official will ding you for testing more. But just know if so many do fail, there is a retesting strategy. So if 30% of your sampling rate, or even of all the rate, if you're doing all 7, or 30% of your sampling rate or more fail, then you have to test every single one. So make sure those things are working. There's also time switch. That also has to be tested. Same strategy as occupancy sensors. I won't go into that. Daylight responsive controls. Nothing new here, but it gets overlooked a ton on existing buildings. There's also another big change in daylight responsive controls in the code. The general lighting wattage allowance is now cut in half for when you need daylight responsive controls. So any space with 75 watts of lighting in a daylight zone now needs to have daylight responsive controls. It used to be 150 watts. Dimming. Dimming is now required in certain space types. Those spaces include things like classrooms, meeting rooms, lobbies, break rooms, offices, things like that. And then there's a new thing in there called high-end trim controls. It's an all-new definition. Is that a lighting control system that limits the maximum power to individual lights or groups of lights in a space. So these are all lighting commissioning items that need to be tested. When we talked about previously in the presentation, lighting or electrical being triggered that needs commissioning, all these things need to be tested. Occupancy sensors, the time switch, the daylight responsive controls, the dimming, the high-end trim controls, and it goes on. So you might be asking, or let's go back to the C406 section that I talked about earlier, which is the additional energy efficiency credits. This is where, depending what you pick in section C406, might trigger additional commissioning. So in the lighting section, demand response lighting controls is one of them if you go after that credit. And then the high-end trim lighting control verification. If you go after that credit, there's additional commissioning requirements. So for the sake of time, I won't go through both of those because those are optional things to pick. But just know if you do select one of those two, demand response lighting controls or high-end trim lighting control from section C406, they will need to be commissioned. Also in the electrical commissioning section, there's a new thing to test: receptacles. Not all projects follow the same strategy for controlled receptacles, but the code does require that at least 50% of the receptacles be switched. It could be tied to an occupancy sensor. It could be tied to vacancy, time clock, manual switch, you name it. There's a bunch of different strategies, but those have to be commissioned. I will say 9 times out of 10 projects, when I go in and commission the receptacles, they do not work correctly. So keep that in mind. Okay, 2 more slides. Reporting. This is the 4th thing that's needed in existing building commissioning. There's 2 reports: a pre-final report and a final report. The old code used to say, hey, just provide us this sheet here. They called it the compliance checklist to the code official, and that was good. It needed to be signed by the owner saying commission was complete. You can see how things may be not a good thing if the owner signing it, saying commission is done. Or, you know, what owner doesn't want to have their building done on time? Okay, now they can get a CO. So they've gotten rid of that. But you still need to have at least the pre-final report from the commission authority before you can call for your final CO. In the pre-final report, you would have your issues log, any deferred testing, and the completed checklist, the testing checklist, the functional performance tests. The code official is allowed to ask for that copy of the preliminary report, and they probably should. It's the only thing telling them that commissioning's been done. And then the final report, that has a little bit more in it. It has all the things we just listed, plus the manuals, which is submittals and operation and maintenance manuals. Also in the code, it says that that final report has to be delivered to the owner or owner's rep within 90 days of your CO. So I don't know how they're going to track that or check that, but it's in the code. All right, last one. How often do we commission existing buildings? How often should we do it? 3 to 5 years. That's the kind of going rate. A ton of studies, a bunch of studies say different things, but 3 to 5 years is about right. Some AHJs, and they might say 5 to 10. They might help pay for it. Some utility companies have incentives for retro or recommissioning. But 3 to 5 years is how often you should be commissioning in existing buildings. And that's the end. I want to thank you all.
Thanks, Kevin. Appreciate it. I have a couple questions for you, but before I do those questions, I just kind of wanted to share my screen real quick of the checklist that we created, just so you guys have an idea of what it looks like and who it's for. It's in Excel, so it's customizable to your jurisdiction or your company, but basically it's intended so that as a guide for jurisdictions when checking for commissioning requirements, or if a jurisdiction wanted to require a commissioning agent to fill this out, that's an option. But us, CXA, can also use this as a reference point for what is required when complying with the commissioning requirements within the code. Obviously, existing building commissioning has its own nuances, as we've heard in this presentation, but it is broken down by MEP commissioning as well as building envelope. So this is available in the code adoption toolkit, and I just wanted to mention that it is available for your use, for your jurisdiction, or for your company. Okay. I'm gonna go ahead and stop sharing my screen, and I've got 2 questions for you. If anyone else does have questions, feel free to raise your hand or put them in the chat or the Q&A, whatever works. The first question we have is, when doing tenant finishes of an unfinished space in a new building, does the space need to be commissioned?
Gotcha. Good question. That's probably what we see the most common of. A lot of times we'll see like a new building going up and the first floor is not finished, and it's going to be like retail or something like that later on. So I think your question is, does that scenario require the space to be commissioned? And the answer is yes. So that would fall under the additions section of Chapter 5. So that says if a unconditioned space is changed to a conditioned space, it falls into the additions section. So you would then follow that one for existing building commissioning requirements.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, the next question is, are there requirements for occupancy sensors with HVAC?
I'm not quite sure what that question is asking. So there are occupancy sensors. I'm wondering if the question, maybe we can get some further clarification while I talk, but I think maybe what you're asking is the HVAC tied to occupancy sensing? So the HVAC only turns on when there's occupancy. I don't, from that standpoint, no, there's no requirements for the HVAC to be controlled solely based on occupancy sensors. Now, there are requirements for lighting on occupancy sensors, and sometimes your HVAC maybe, I'm trying to think of a scenario, potentially in like hotels, where they would have the little key card that you would put in when you get into the room to turn on your HVAC and your lighting and things like that. That could potentially be a scenario that you're talking about where there would be a requirement for that. But in other types of occupancies, building occupancies, groups, there is no requirement for HVAC to follow an occupancy sensor or schedule.
Perfect. Thanks, Kevin. I'm not seeing any additional context come through, but hopefully that answered your question, Robert. And if you do have any follow-up questions, don't hesitate to reach out, submit a helpline question, or whatever works. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.